All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We'll give everyone a little time to filter in and we'll get started in 2 or 3 minutes. Welcome, everyone. There's still a couple people coming in, so we'll just give it another minute or two and let everyone get in and Zoom settled, and then we'll get started. All right, we'll get started. Looks like we have a good quorum. I am Dr. Jennifer Koch. Good evening. I'm glad you all could join us. Thank you for joining us tonight for our Survivorship webinar series, Thriving After Cancer, Strategies and State of Mind. June is nationally recognized as Cancer Survivor Month, and during this month, we have the opportunity for all 16.9 million cancer survivors across the country to celebrate their milestones and recognize those who have supported them along the way. Cancer Survivor Month is also an opportunity for those who have not been affected by cancer to learn and understand the challenges that accompany survivorship. After this challenging year, I'm really looking forward to tonight's talk entitled Coping Resources Inside and Out. And now I'm going to introduce our speakers. Dr. David Bullis is the Director of Behavioral Medicine here at the Mass General Cancer Center at Newton-Wellesley Hospital. He brings over 25 years of experience in treating the mental and emotional challenges of physical illness. He's a graduate of the California School of Professional Psychology with postdoctoral training in neuropsychology and health and geriatric psychology. He's been on staff here since 2014, working to support patients and families and the staff that serve them as they all go through the cancer treatment journey together. He's part of the team of integrated support services providers that work to bring a total person perspective to our high quality medical care. Joining Dr. Bullis tonight, we have Georgia Goimeratz-Leiner. Georgia Goimeratz-Leiner holds a Doctor of Ministry degree in spirituality from the Boston University School of Theology and a Master of Arts in Pastoral Care and Counseling from Boston College. She's a board certified chaplain and is a former chaplain of the Emerson Hospital. Dr. Goimeratz-Leiner is also a poet. She holds a master's degree in creative writing from the University of Virginia, Charlottesville, and she occasionally publishes poems in literary journals. Lastly, Georgia is a trained spiritual director and offers spiritual direction through her private practice. We are so looking forward to your talk and for the audience to know that throughout you can post questions in the Q&A button at the bottom, and we will have a Q&A at the end with our speakers.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I'll kick off this event and I'm going to share my screen so you can see. We're going to do some slides and we'll kind of go through what I'm going to do. The first thing is just starting off with some of the basic layout of coping, and that's what my background is in. And then Georgia will kind of go into a more specific element of the coping model to really highlight what she's done so well. First, neither one of us are making any money on this deal, so this is just a part of the disclosures. But to talk about the coping model, and I think the coping model is important because when you're going through the treatment process from the very beginning, and then into in the thick of it, and then even after into survivorship, it's helpful to have an organizing principle of how we think about and how we get through challenging times. And that's true whether it's about cancer or in other illnesses as well. But obviously tonight we're going to be talking about that journey in the cancer world. So part of the way I think of a coping model that has been useful is to really think of it like a Greek column, or a column in front of the, in an old Greek temple, or in front of the bank. But the very basic element of this is that there's sort of 4 key elements to this, and this really sort of summarizes the humanness of us all, and recognizing that at the very basic element, the bottom part of the column is really our physical health. The next is our mental, or thinking, how we think about things, rather than the sort of the psychiatric sense of mental health, more of a cognitive sense of this. The emotional health is sort of the next level up, and spiritual health really is the capstone for all of us. And Georgia will talk more about that in a minute. But it's important to notice that these are all sort of one linked onto the other. They all are interacting with each other. So one's physical health obviously affects how one thinks about health, how one thinks about their emotions, how one thinks about spirituality and that level. Likewise, if we're having confusion about what's happening, and oftentimes when people are first entering into treatment or first entering into survivorship, it's very common to have a lot of questions, and those questions have a real impact on us emotionally because we don't know what's going to happen, and that not knowing is a cognitive thing that we wrestle with. Everybody wrestles with. So this is sort of the overall model within which coping, as I've described it, is framed. And of course, physical health relates to all things in the body. So that is our brain, our arteries, our heart, our lungs, whatever body part was affected by the cancer, etc. And when we think about coping, we're really thinking about building up our strength, having access to diet advice, really getting back into exercise, which may have fallen off our list of things to do during treatment. Getting a sleep cycle back and helping manage that is often something that is very important after the active phases of treatment are over and sort of entering into the survivorship model, time frame. Obviously, pain management. There's a lot of aches and pains that are left over after the treatment is done, sometimes because of treatment and other times just because now that cancer's over, we have time and energy to think about the other aches and pains, our knees, our hips, our backs, that we hadn't really given much time or attention to. Obviously, medications and learning how to manage medications, titrating off medications, getting on new medications, all of these things and are a part of the real sense of coping in survivorship. And the other 2 talks that you've had in this series this month have really talked about many of those things. Obviously, health maintenance and getting back to thinking about other regular checkups is also an important part of survivorship, and that's where the survivorship care plan is often a major part of what happens. The mental or cognitive aspect of care really is thinking about how we think, what we know, and what we understand. And this is sort of the logic or the level of information that we're seeking. And there are good aspects to this when we talk to our awesome physicians like Dr. Commander and others. But it's also, this is what happens when we go Googling stuff and we go on the internet and act, what what does this side effect mean, and how that affects us when we learn information? I mean, is it real, sort of valid information or not? And thinking about that can be a big part of coping in survivorship as well. And the mental part really sort of underlies what our expectations are, what we hope will happen, what we think will happen. And expectations are oftentimes hard to pin down with all the uncertainty that comes with entering into the quote new normal. And what does that look like in survivorship? Learning how to feel safe in making plans, because making plans during cancer treatment was always a bit dicey in terms of how you were going to feel or what was going to be expected. And of course, all of this has been on turbo over the last 18 months with COVID, which has completely blown away everybody's expectations and plans. And so, if we're talking about this in terms of the cancer world, we can certainly also talk about it as being even more emphasized during the COVID period. Reestablishing routines and setting up schedules as a way of organizing our time and our day. These are all things that are part of the coping, and part of, like, when we can do those things, we are in a better position to cope with what comes. Learning new things, and this is sort of that notion of what a new normal would look like, is that it may look kind of like the old normal, but once you've been through cancer treatment, there is no going back to the old normal, but there can be a new normal. And so learning what those things are, in terms of our physical body, in terms of our expectations, for example, those are all part of this kind of concept of coping at the cognitive or mental level. Emotional health, as we're all familiar with the happiness, sadness, the feelings and reactions to life, and in the sense of our work as in managing the survivorship journey. You may feel any of these that are listed. You may feel any number. I always describe it as the Baskin and Robbins of emotional experience, because it is everything you can imagine. They're all normal reactions. And a part of recognizing that coping is knowing that these are normal, that it is not, we don't need to pathologize sadness or worry or frustration. One of the most common emotions, in fact, in survivorship is the fear of recurrence. When is it? If is it? Will it ever come back? And how does one manage that, right? But because we know it's a normal experience, we then have to sort of put in place strategies for recognizing that I will manage what comes by having these strategies in place. Having some sense of connection with your medical team, for example. We happen to have an amazing medical team and support services, just putting a plug in for us. But literally, it's the full range of feelings. And I've been talking with many clients who have struggled with this idea of, like, on the one hand, I should be so happy to be done with treatment. I survived it. I got through all the different aspects of it. I am so excited. And then at the very exact same moment, I can also feel worried, like, who's going to take care of me? Why do you mean I don't get to go see those wonderful nurses at the hospital? They were so compassionate to me. I miss them. I talked with somebody, recently who said he was very glad to be told he didn't have to come in as often, and then felt kind of sad about that at the same moment. So that's all of that experience and coping with that, strategizing, what do I do? Talking about that with friends and family, talking about that with professionals like myself or Dr. Koch or our fantastic social work team, or the nurse navigators, or anybody, just recognizing that this is a part of that journey, and finding ways to establish that new normal can be a big part of alleviating a lot of those negative emotions. As normal as they are, they don't have to be there. I mean, they don't have to be permanent. You can manage them just the way during treatment you managed nausea or fatigue or pain. We want to make sure that we're actively trying to manage these emotions as well. So that's sort of the whole process. Now the spiritual health, which I'm going to let Georgia really talk in much more detail about, really refers to this sense of something bigger than ourselves. And I think that is something that a lot of our making sense of what we've been through can rest on this area as well. So I could talk obviously for days and weeks, as some people who know me will know, but I really want to make sure that we take time to sort of zero in tonight on this element of the project, because I think in a lot of ways this is something that oftentimes goes untalked about and unrecognized as an important component of coping. You know, we have spiritual care at Newton-Wellesley Hospital, and they're a great team. They mostly work on the inpatient side, but they are available. And I think George can really speak to sort of how to use this level of coping and this domain as a very, very powerful way of bringing together. Because remember, this sits on top. This is the capstone on top of the physical, the mental, and the emotional aspects of ourselves. So I think I will hand it over to Georgia. And Georgia, you'll just tell me what you need, and I will move the slides along as you are ready.
Okay, then next slide, please.
Is that the right one?
That's still yours.
Okay, good. There we go.
Okay. Keep going.
All right, here we go.
Keep going. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. I am happy to be with you. Thank you for being with us. And I will present my part in 5 parts. I've organized what I will share into sections, and just to organize what I'm trying to impart or at least present. So I will talk about the wisdom of scriptures and life experience, addressing the spiritual needs, resilience, I have faith, and then creativity. So we will begin. The next slide, please. So my first theme, the wisdom of scriptures and life experience. So I don't know if it's clear yet, but I'm presenting here now as a healthcare chaplain, but also as obviously a cancer patient. I feel that although I have survived my diagnosis, I continue to live with cancer. My husband, my immediate and extended families live with cancer because of me. Many among us live with cancer, and so in effect, the whole world is living with cancer. And thus, dispensing with a false sense of security, we bravely not only die out of our cancers, but we also live out of our cancers. So that wisdom came from a cancer patient I met as a chaplain that I ministered to. I've learned so much about coping with illness from some of the wisest patients. There is a line in Psalm 138 that says, "Though I walk among affliction, you give me life." Now, when I first came across that line, I had no illness, but was deeply touched by the implications of the message in that line. And so, working as a chaplain, I offered the line to the patients as a way of giving them hope. I would ponder the seemingly contradictory meaning of the statement with the patients when it was appropriate. I was always aware that I should only offer suggestions which I intuit might be helpful rather than offer something because it's a good idea. So now I know firsthand how it feels to be afflicted and yet be given a chance to live, and to live actively and hopefully. Though I walk among affliction, I'm given life. Here in this notion, the inside and outside, or as the inner and the outer resources are at play, both. On the inner level, hope comes from within me, but on the outside, my help comes from someone else. I might say God or medicine, and from some wonderful doctors that Dr. Bliss Dave has referred to, and medical teams assembled from a variety of disciplines. And two, we often wonder whether prayer helps during illness. And the scripture, specifically a passage from the book of Sirach, which is from the Hebrew scriptures, has this to offer. When you are ill, do not delay, but pray to God, for it is God who heals. Flee wickedness and purify your hands. Cleanse your heart of every sin. Offer your sweet-smelling oblation and memorial, a generous offering according to your means. Then give the doctor his or her place, lest he or she leave you. You need the doctor too. For there are times when recovery is in the doctor's hands. The doctor too may be praying that his or her diagnosis may be correct and that his or her treatment bring about a cure. The next slide, please. In addition to the wisdom of the scriptures, as I mentioned, I learned wisdom from my experience of working with some wise patients. So it is also their experience that I bring to mind. Here are a few of these wise people's sayings, patients, people afflicted with cancer. One of the first people I've ever met as a chaplain was diagnosed with breast cancer. And when I came to see her and I spoke with her and she said, "Why not me?" I was amazed by her grace, humility, and courage. She turned the question, "Why me?" on its head. I thought that was just so original and strong. And another person said, "It is not how old you get to be, but how wise." Or as the scripture says, "Teach us to number our years aright, that we may gain wisdom of heart." And one person said, "Too soon, too old, too late, too smart." And what did George Carlin, the comedian, have to say? "We must thank comedians for making us laugh at ourselves." Carlin said, "The hospital is full of sick people asking, why me?" So obviously it's not just the me, but the question points to how we feel sometimes. We may be feeling singled out to be sick while everyone else is well. But truly, it is not true that there are people without problems. Everyone has something that they're not telling us about. In any case, we meet people where they are. We meet ourselves where we are and go on from there. Next slide, please. So my theme too, addressing spiritual needs. So we address the humility of being sick, the fear of being sick, the self-pity of our being sick. One of my spiritual assessment questions, especially if a patient census indicated that the person was religious, I would ask, "How is your faith?" And very often the patient would be confused by my question. I would enunciate as clearly as possible, "How is your faith?" And the person would still look confused, touch her face, and say, "My face is fine." And I would agree, yes, your face is fine. "How is your faith?" I'd ask. "Oh," they said, and we went on from there. So it sometimes the answer can at first throw you off your plan that you're going to neatly find out how a person's faith is. Instead, you have to be ready to laugh, to have a good sense of humor. The importance of diagnosing and addressing a patient's faith is in that faith faith is the path to hope and trust. And hope leads to positive or optimistic thinking. And trust allows us to let others help us. Our help comes from many sources. Another question I would ask was, how are your spirits? And this too gave some patients a reason to pun. They'd say, oh, I like a drink now and then. But mostly they'd answer, not so good. Or I'm spiritual, but not religious. Which topic, a complex one, would require another presentation, because people have so many different reasons for saying that. So sometimes it can be very hard to address a person's true needs. You have to think on your feet as well as hold on to your empathy, sympathy, and compassion. Another question I would ask, how are you coping? This question too needed further explanation. I would ask whether they had family or friends, or whether they prayed, took walks, listened to music, had a hobby, and so on. Their coping mechanisms would come from within or outwardly. People so often reply to the question of coping by naming three things: family, friends, and faith. And it got to the point where I would ask a patient, do you have the three F's of coping? Coping with family, friends, and faith combine the inner and outer resources all in one. And there were people who had a hard time coming up with meaningful ways of coping, but often the coping mechanisms could be coaxed out just by hearing a person's life experience, their life story. Many people drew solace from nature and the universe, or just from something greater than themselves. A healing moment can be a reflection of watching the full moon rise over a lake or another body of water, or watching a sunrise, hiking on a mountain, walking on the beach by the ocean, attending a concert, reading a good book. Then they could be encouraged to make a commitment to repeatedly seek out opportunities to do the things they like on an ongoing basis, in a sense, to ritualize the things that they find meaningful. For people whom I couldn't ask about their faith or family and friends, because I knew those were not in their part of their resources, I would ask what kind of things would give them joy or add meaning to their lives. And here's a list of things that people mentioned that added meaning to their lives, or at least helped them pass the time, which is important. So they listened to music or sometimes played an instrument, reading, being out in nature, doing things with their hands like quilting, knitting, crocheting, walking in their neighborhoods, running on the trails. Many people found meaning and joy in traveling, and some going to the movies and others going to Foxwoods. And there were others who had opportunities to gather with friends on a regular basis. Next slide, please. So I thought I would also say something about resilience as it applies to spirituality and imagination and creativity. I'm spiritual, of course, and I believe that spirituality is a dimension of being human. Now, whether we deepen that spiritual reality depends on a lot of factors. I would say try everything and see if it helps. To quote from the wisdom of the scriptures again, test everything, retain what is good. Question your assumptions and see where they come from. So I would say to enjoy the inner resource of your spirituality. It does not mean that you have to convert to a religion, but that you can draw courage and hope from the wisdom of the scriptures. What it means is that you are tapping into anything that resonates with you. Resilience, for instance, which is much talked about in our day, it has been applied broadly across areas such as childhood development, utility operations, and community planning. So, psychologically and spiritually speaking, resilience is an inner resource. It's built in our humanness. It is not something we have to go outside of ourselves to find, though we can get help in learning about it. So for me, imagination and creativity are part and parcel of my spirituality, which is a part and parcel of my resilience. So let me give you an image for which you may close your eyes if you like for the exercise of it. And I will just tell you an image of resilience. It is winter. There has been a heavy snowfall. The white pine branches are weighed down by the heavy snow. In the morning, the sun comes up and its warmth melts the snow around the edges of the snow-laden pine branches. During the night, when the temperatures drop, the melted snow freezes. Now the bent branches are pinned frozen to the ground. You're tempted to try to free the branches and have them bounce up. But no, you cannot, because you might break them. The melting and the freezing goes on for days, for a week perhaps. But by and by the branches are relieved of the snow, and the tree returns to its lovely symmetry, its balance. And you may open your eyes if you had closed them. So our burdens, such as cancers, can weigh us down, pin our spirits down to the ground. We need to learn from nature because we are nature. We have to let more time go by to be a good patient and to be patient with our own inner weather and our outside weather. Just as the white pine tree has resilience, we do too, and it works all by itself. Indeed, we must try not to be in control of it because control makes us rigid, and that rigidity can keep us from bouncing back or even snap. We must stay flexible. A poet named May Sarton wrote a poem called An Observation, and she writes about her mother, who is a gardener and never wears gloves, especially if her seedlings are very fragile. And so Sarton wrote that, like her mother, we must pay with some toughness for a gentler world. We must pay with some toughness for a gentler world. In our living with cancer, the gentler world we want is the healing of our inner and outer selves. Next slide, please. So as we move along, we are on my theme 4, I have faith. What do you have? I have faith, family and friends. Who or what do you have? So when I received my diagnosis, I had to rearrange my psychology and my world. It was dark. I prayed and I took stock of my life while I processed how the diagnosis would change my life, how I would live my life with this new challenge. I lost balance in my thinking, in my symmetry. It did not take me long to realize that I was thinking about cancer way too much and that I had to balance my thinking with all other parts of me because I am much more than cancer. We are much more than our cancers. I also decided that random people did not need to know about my cancer. This is because some people may not be comfortable hearing about it. And also, I find that people can be very either or about cancer. That is, you're either cured or not, but there is that holy ground in between where, although I walk amid affliction, I am given life, a good life. There is no balance or wholeness in the either or thinking because we're not just alive, we're just dead. Balance is in realizing that our lives are ongoing and uncertain at the same time. Through the insight into and embrace of how precarious our lives are, we gain empowerment and serenity. We're able to integrate those two truths of our ongoing lives and the possibility of death into one life. Though we have cancer or history of it or possibility of it, we're given life. Shall I say again, is it by God, by medicine, by doctors, by others, or by the infinite source of life from the universe? Next slide, please. And so here we are in creativity. Creativity of whatever kind, dancing, singing, painting, writing, designing, all can contribute to our coping, to our healing. So I will give you some questions to ponder before I get to the poem. How can you use your imagination and creativity to help you cope? Can you read or write some poetry, visit a museum, take a walk in a horticultural gardens area, attend a workshop of interest? What gives your life meaning? Whatever it is, access it repeatedly. What gives you peak experiences? Whatever they are, seek them again. How is your faith? What or whom do you have faith in? It could be God or life or goodness or love or science. Or is faith like an attitude toward life? For example, is your glass half full or half empty? No matter which way you feel, the amount of liquid is the same. You just need to get a smaller glass. How are your spirits? Spirits are feelings, moods, energy, and joie de vivre, which means a joy in being alive. How are you finding joy of being alive? Even if you cannot be very active or creative, Rabbi Abraham Heschel said, maybe that's the next slide, just to be is a blessing, just to live is holy. Do you want to try and see if there's another slide?
Nope.
No, we missed that one somehow. Okay. So earlier I mentioned about my reckoning with my diagnosis, accepting the inevitability of death, inspired me to write the following poem. And so here it is. And it's called The Road. My friend, the road behind me is longer than the road ahead. Each day, each season, each year, I need less and less clutter, fewer purchases, fewer disputations, and more contentment with what I already have. I live without fear of what will come in sincerity of my faith, though when fear comes, I process it like a bitter food. I pray, and somehow out of the darkness comes a sunrise or a moonrise or Venus or simply me touching with my feet the smooth oak floor next to my bed to make certain that I'm steady and ready for the road. When I am done traveling and death comes, I will experience an ecstasy which I will not live to tell. I will experience an ecstasy which I will not live to tell. And so I asked, what will the secret of your death be? But for the time being, just to be is a blessing, just to live is holy. And there it is. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Georgia. That was wonderful. And, I think it really, it does such a nice job of articulating what that highest level of the coping pyramid, column does, right? And I think that sense of that connection with something bigger, whether it's about a religious faith or about, connection with family or friends or whatever. I think that is a part of why that's such an important part. And I think we don't talk about it enough as professionals. I'm sure you felt that in your work as a pastoral counselor, that the medical world doesn't talk about this part of it enough, I think. And I think that's why it was such an awesome thing for you to share that with us tonight.
Well, do they not? They it depends how what circles you can connect with within your
Right.
workplace.
Right.
We did have Schwartz rounds at Emerson, and
Yeah.
we often did spirituality in different forms, and it does take work. It takes work to weave yourself into the groups and committees, but it gets done, I think.
I
But
think so too.
it
I
has
think if
to
we
be
make the
done-
effort, right?
yeah, it has to be done in the right way, because it's
Mhm.
not, my goal was never to convince,
Mhm.
but to offer. And sometimes it sounded good. And and the offer was taken.
Right.
Yeah, but
Right.
obviously, I think that it needs to be integrated. But but where does the education start for that?
Mhm.
And to be fair, how does everyone have this kind of background and their training to know how to utilize that aspect of the medical service and the person?
Right. Well, I also think that this last slide on creativity, I'm leaving it up, I think, mostly because I think it opens up a whole nother realm for coping, right? And I talk a lot about helping people focus on what they do have control over as an antidote to the uncertainty that comes with survivorship and living with cancer. And I've said this a million times to clients that we've gotten so good in cancer care that we've taken it from an acute illness to a chronic illness, and that now everybody's living with it over the long haul, which means that we all have to find ways to live with that uncertainty over the long haul. And so finding ways of expressing oneself, whether it's through dancing, singing, painting, writing, designing, and many, many other things, it opens up a whole new avenue. I mean, we talk a lot about physical coping and getting stronger, and we talk a lot about mental learning, about how to reframe our lives. And we talk a fair amount about the emotional coping, because that's obviously what people think about the most in terms of getting over fear or worry. But this opens up a whole nother level of connecting. And I think that's very, very powerful. I want to make sure that we leave time for questions. And if anybody from the audience has questions, I don't think I can see the Q&A, but I think my colleagues can. And if there are questions there, we would be happy to take them. And if there are not, we can continue to riff on this stuff.
Thanks to both of you for your insightful remarks. This was really a remarkable evening, and I know we're so grateful to learn from you. And yes, I'd encourage participants, if you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat box below, and we can certainly pose your questions to our speakers. Georgia, I didn't even know you were a poet, by the way, so that was really beautiful, and I would love to receive a copy of your poem. But I'm curious, in your work as a chaplain, you noted you've worked with many patients who had diagnoses of cancer over the years, and you learned so much from your patients, as I do as well. I'm curious how you applied some of those own lessons to your own diagnosis, if that was sort of helped you frame how you've been your own coping strategies.
Yes, it was something I had to step into that. Why not me? You know, that woman so bravely said to me, she said, why not me? Why, not why me? Why do I have cancer? But she said, why not me? So when, you know, in my diagnosis, I'd have to grow to that. I'd have to step up to that, because it seemed to me a truth. You know, why am I exempt? Why, you know, it's not something that we that we have control over. No one can have control over it. It's not to say, we definitely have to address the feeling of why me. But in my case, it was, I was already reaching for why not me, and then and accepting that, and be in touch with the rest of myself. I was still, well, I think I probably asked you, will I still be able to do the things that I like to do? And you said, of course you will. So, you know, once I realized that I could do things and I could be who I am, I could be the grandmother, the mother, the wife, the sister, the daughter, you know, the friend. I could be all those things still. I could still do gardening. So getting to that balance was important for me. And then I learned, you know, from that other patient who said, I don't just die out of my cancer. I live out of it too, you know. And I took that I still had, I think, you know, I took just the best things that then were helpful to me from the, I think I was focusing on the courageous and really reflective kind of way of being. And so, you know, we can cultivate reflection. Of course, I seem to be naturally that way. I can just sit there and, you know, think, but it can be cultivated. So those patients, I think, were reflective, and through reflection, it does lead to becoming aware of so many aspects, and you become freer to not dwell on just that part of yourself that's undergoing treatment, or, you know, is a survivor. Does that speak to what you?
Oh,
I think
definitely.
that's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Role models, I guess. We need role models.
Definitely. Thank you. And I just want to share a lovely comment from one of our participants. Everything that both of you have shared is incredibly valuable, powerful tools for healing. Thank you so much. So, and certainly we want to echo that as well.
Yes. Thank you both. The talk was so wonderful. Georgia, I'm still struck by the image of the tree returning to balance, and you both mentioned flexibility and control. And one of the commenters has mentioned, right, that this is that cancer dictates her life, is how she's saying that she doesn't rule her life anymore. And so I'm wondering how you apply that balance, that flexibility, when that's the case.
Can you say one more thing about that? I'm not sure. I need another piece to answer.
Yes.
Or just
so with, I'm not sure if I put it all together quite how she meant it, but I'm taking from it this kind of lack of control, that cancer rules things and dictates day to day. And so how do you apply that resilience, that flexibility? The question is my add-on. How to apply those lessons.
Well, one way to respond is that we're, even in this presentation, we focused on inside and outside resources. So, far be it from me that would be able to give her an answer like that, or, that I would expect her to accept it. But I think it would be a conversation with someone, maybe not within herself, but someone on the outside, depending on on which way this person would, what kind of a person would this like to consult, because it's not, um, someone once wrote a book that was called that easy questions, difficult answers, whatever. So, but I couldn't answer her question without speaking with her more, because she's full-fledged and she has her own life story that's all part of the way she feels. So,
Yeah.
to unfold that, um, somehow, I think is worth doing, and reaching out to an outside resource if it's not coming from within. But maybe start by reflecting on why should that be? Why have I no choice in this matter? Something.
I think that's great. And I also think that what I talk with folks about is that, cancer you live with cancer it's like the brother-in-law who moves into your den. You don't get to kick it out, but you, at the same time, control is sort of, there's concentric circles of control, and in my body, I have control over what I do with myself, what I do with my time. And then as I feel more healthy, I can sort of expand that out to having some control of what I do with the people around me, and that sort of thing. And I think this sort of notion of creativity, recognizing that I have choice and I have some control over what I do with my time. For some people, that might be dancing, and other people, that might be writing. For some people, that might be watching, old TV programs, or sometimes it might be learning a new skill. And I think that sense of, I always love the glass half full and the glass half empty, because really, they're both true. In fact, they're equally true. And what we talk about in my work with folks is thinking about that we use the full half of the glass to cope with the empty half aspects of our lives. That one does not negate the other. That just because we have aches and pains doesn't mean we don't also have strengths. Just because we may be living alone in an apartment doesn't mean we don't have people who care about us. So I think that notion, and this notion of wrestling for control, that's sort of what the new normal is about, right? Is recognizing, how do I reclaim control? Because no offense to our medical team, but they oftentimes will tell us when we have to be in the hospital and what medicine we take and all those things, and people gratefully accept that. But the idea of noting that I have some control over the things I can touch, and that's sort of my simple-minded way of thinking about it. If I can touch it, I can control it, and if I can't touch it, I can't control it. And using my strengths to overcome my weaknesses, recognizing that both are real, is one of the main ways to do that. And I love this creativity idea, and the spirituality idea is one of the ways in which we can regain some balance in our lives.
But the whole thing about the creativity, is the old way of writing was by inspiration. So there's a spirit there, and
Yep.
So we create with that, with inspiration. So that's why creativity is also we're making something. Creating is making something, and we're co-creating, with the rest of the nature. Maybe the image of the crushed, the iced branch, that image of resilience of that, it takes time.
Right.
So maybe going through the steps, some kind of steps that that can help just last a little longer in time. Let more time go by for that control to leave you. So that's part of being a patient.
Right. Patience is a virtue.
Well, patience is a struggle.
Right, exactly.
Forget
Yeah.
about virtues.
Right. It's a hard one virtue for sure.
Yeah,
It's a hard one virtue for sure.
some old symbolism I love, like writing by inspiration rather than prompting. But
Right.
virtue, I don't know.
So thank you very much, Georgia, for coming and speaking with us today. And thank you, audience. Although we couldn't see you, we felt your energy, and it was lovely to have you here with us. And I think it's just important to notice that all of the 3 talks that we had this month to celebrate survivorship really get at some of the core concepts we were talking about tonight, which is that there are tools to be resilient. There are ways of reclaiming control, whether it's about diet or whether it's about meditation or relaxation, or whether it's about finding ways to be creative, and that everyone's strength is unique to them. And we encourage you to find that strength within yourself, and sometimes that helps to talk with other people about it, and sometimes it's okay just to think, I really want to fill in the blank, right? And this is an opportunity to really reflect on that survivorship is an ongoing journey, and that cancer will sort of always be in the background, but it doesn't have to be the defining factor. And I think, Georgia, you have been a great example of thriving in your post-treatment world, and I think that's such a gift for us all to be aware of.
Yes,
Thank
if I can do it, others can do it too.
Excellent.
Commander, thank you so much for asking me to speak.
Thank you so much. This was great. Dr. Bullis, do you mind quickly telling our audience if there were some questions about how one can make an appointment with you? Do you want to quickly answer that?
Sure. Yeah. If you want to make an appointment, the appointment telephone number is, if everyone has the pen, and we can actually put it in the chat, or wherever the Q&A is. The 617 831 7430. And I don't see the chat box.
I just put it in. Don't worry.
There you go. I'm not allowed to have the chat box apparently. Anyway,
okay.
So that's the phone number for making an appointment with any of the support services, whether it's massage, Reiki, social work, nutrition, myself, any of our nurse navigators. All of those specialties orbit out of that. The folks who man that telephone can put you on any of our schedules. So we would look forward to any of us would look forward to meeting any of you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you so much to both of you for these brilliant remarks. We really appreciate it. And this is the final webinar in our survivorship series for the month of June. So thank you all for attending, and we look forward to hosting further events in the future.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.